You don't need to eat less. You don't need to cut out rice, give up beans, or live on salad to control your blood sugar. What science has discovered in recent years will surprise you because the most powerful change a person with diabetes can make at mealtime has nothing to do with what is on the plate. It has everything to do with the order in which you eat what is on your plate. Same foods, same amount, same calories. Just by changing the sequence, studies published in the journal Diabetes Care, the official scientific publication of the American Diabetes Association and one of the most respected in the field, documented a reduction of up to 73% in the postprandial glycemic area under the curve. 73%. This number isn't from a health blog, it's from researchers at Weill Cornell Medicine, the medical school of Cornell University, and it has been replicated in subsequent studies with consistent results. The researchers themselves wrote that the effect of food order on blood glucose is comparable in magnitude to many oral hypoglycemic medications. Clinical guidelines confirm this. Starting a meal with fiber and protein reduces the glycemic peak by around 73% and the insulin peak by up to 48%. Before I continue, I need to say something fundamental because I don't want anyone leaving this video making a wrong decision. Everything you will learn today is a complement to medical treatment, never a substitute. If you use metformin, insulin, or any other diabetes medication, do not change, reduce, or stop anything on your own because of this video or any other. The correct food order strategy is a powerful tool that works alongside your treatment, adding effects to what you already do. Continue with your medications, continue with regular follow-ups with your doctor, and add this knowledge as another layer of protection in your daily life. I am Dr. Sarah Walker. And before we move on, one quick thing. If you want more than 630 practical recipes designed for the daily life of those with diabetes, with meals already assembled considering glycemic control, from lunches to breakfasts, the link to our ebook is here in the description. Now let's get to what matters. Subscribe to the channel. Here I publish health content every week with real scientific backing, explained clearly and without alarmism, especially for those aged 55 and older. To understand why order matters so much, you need to understand what happens inside your body in the 30 to 60 minutes after starting a meal. Every carbohydrate you eat, whether it's rice, bread, potatoes, pasta, tapioca, cassava, couscous, any of them, needs to be broken down into glucose by digestive enzymes before being absorbed. And it is this glucose that crosses the intestinal wall, enters the bloodstream, and causes the glycemic spike. The speed at which this glucose reaches the blood is what determines the height of the peak. And this speed is controlled by two main factors: the speed at which the stomach empties its contents into the small intestine, a process doctors call gastric emptying, and the speed at which digestive enzymes, mainly alpha amylase and alpha glucosidase, break down carbohydrates into glucose within the small intestine. When you start your meal with carbohydrates, nothing is in front of them. The enzymes are available and active, the stomach empties quickly, and within 30 to 40 minutes, that wave of glucose is already in the bloodstream causing a spike. The pancreas goes into emergency mode, releases a large amount of insulin all at once, and begins the cycle of peaks and crashes that, repeated day after day over years, wears down the pancreas, deepening insulin resistance and progressively worsening the control of the disease. Now look at what happens when you reverse the logic and eat in the correct order. When you start with vegetables rich in fiber, salad, cooked vegetables, kale, squash, zucchini, green beans, these fibers reach the small intestine before any carbohydrate and form what researchers call a viscous physical barrier on the intestinal wall. This barrier does not block glucose absorption, but it forces it to pass much more slowly through the intestinal wall. Instead of a flood in 30 minutes, the glucose drips in gradually over 60, 90, or even 120 minutes. The curve that would have been an abrupt peak turns into a smooth and controlled elevation, which the pancreas can handle much more efficiently, releasing insulin proportionally to the gradual increase in glucose instead of an emergency bolus all at once. When you eat protein after the vegetables and before the carbohydrates, something additional and very relevant happens. Protein stimulates the release of hormones called incretins, especially GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1. If you follow diabetes news, you've already heard of this hormone because it is the mechanism of action for the most modern diabetes medications, such as semaglutide and liraglutide. GLP-1 does three very important things. It further slows gastric emptying, stimulates insulin production proportionally to the actual need of the moment, and signals satiety to the brain. A study published in 2020 specifically confirmed that the sequence of consuming protein before carbohydrates promotes the early secretion of GLP-1, and this combination significantly improves postprandial glucose responses. Official diabetes guidelines confirm that consuming protein before a carbohydrate meal stimulates insulin production and decreases gastric emptying, reducing the postprandial glucose curve. Patients who used continuous glucose monitoring sensors showed that consuming protein before a meal reduced the early postprandial peak noticeably on the charts. And when the carbohydrates finally arrive, they find a completely different environment than they would if they were first. The intestine is already partially lined by the viscous fiber barrier from the vegetables. Gastric emptying has been slowed by the protein. Incretins are already active, stimulating a proportional insulin response, and glucose absorption happens much more gradually and in a controlled manner. Now I'm going to tell you in detail about the study that changed the way medicine thinks about this topic. In 2015, researchers from the Comprehensive Weight Control Center at Weill Cornell Medical College in New York published a study in diabetes care involving type 2 diabetics using metformin. Participants consumed the exact same meal with the same composition and calories on 2 different days, 1 week apart. On the first day, carbohydrates first, followed by protein and vegetables 15 minutes later. On the second day, protein and vegetables first, followed by carbohydrates 15 minutes later. The results were expressive, a reduction of 28.6% in blood glucose at 30 minutes, 36.7% at 60 minutes, and 16.8% at 120 minutes when vegetables and protein were consumed first. The total area under the glycemic curve was 73% smaller, and insulin levels were also significantly lower. In 2017, the same group published a second, more comprehensive study, this time comparing 3 conditions: carbohydrate first, protein and vegetables first, and all foods together like in a sandwich. The carbohydrates last pattern again produced the lowest peaks and the smallest area under the glycemic curve throughout the follow-up period. In 2019, the study was replicated in people with prediabetes, and incremental glucose peaks were reduced by more than 40% in both the vegetables first and protein and vegetables first orders, compared to carbohydrates first. And in January 2025, the same group of researchers published a new study in diabetes care, this time confirming that the carbohydrate last strategy improves time in range, which is the percentage of time blood glucose remains in the ideal range, and reduces glycemic variability. They also confirmed that the effect is maintained in both controlled laboratory conditions and free living conditions in real daily life. This is fundamental because it means the strategy works outside the lab, in everyday lunch, and not just in a research environment. Now let's get to the most practical part of the video: how to apply this to your daily plate without having to change what you eat, without needing special recipes or imported foods. The correct order is this: first vegetables, then protein, and finally carbohydrates. Let's break down each stage with real examples of everyday eating. The first stage is starting with salad or cooked vegetables. This is the front line that prepares the intestine to receive the rest of the meal. The more fiber in these vegetables, the better the protective barrier that forms. Green leaves like lettuce, arugula, watercress, spinach, and kale are excellent choices. Raw vegetables like tomato, cucumber, grated carrots, and beets also work very well. Cooked vegetables like zucchini, eggplant, green beans, broccoli, cauliflower, and squash are great options when a raw salad isn't available or for those who prefer cooked vegetables. The important thing is that this stage comes before anything else, before the beans, before the meat, before the rice, and here is a detail that makes a real difference. The salad dressing can further amplify the protective effect. Extra virgin olive oil, being a healthy fat, slightly slows gastric emptying. Lemon, containing citric acid, partially inhibits alpha amylase, the enzyme that breaks down starch into glucose. Apple cider vinegar, which contains acetic acid, has the same inhibitory effect on this enzyme. So a salad seasoned with olive oil and lemon before the meal already accumulates multiple layers of glycemic protection before the first forkful of rice, as we have discussed in detail in the video about the correct order of eating salad here on the channel. The second stage is protein. On a typical plate, this means roasted or grilled chicken, lean beef, fish, eggs, beans, chickpeas, lentils, or tofu. Protein comes after the vegetables and before the carbohydrate. If you always mix everything on the plate at the same time, start by making a simple change. Eat a good portion of the meat or chicken along with the beans first, and only then have the rice. You don't need a long interval between stages. What matters is that the protein enters the stomach with priority over the concentrated carbohydrate. An important note, especially for those who have kidney disease associated with diabetes, which is common in long-term diabetics. Excessive protein consumption can strain the kidneys. If you have any degree of renal impairment or proteinuria, the amount of protein in your diet needs to be defined and monitored by your doctor or nutritionist. The order strategy can be applied with the amounts already recommended for your case just by reorganizing the sequence in which you eat what is already on your plate. The third stage is the carbohydrate: rice, beans mixed with rice, potatoes, cassava, pasta, bread, tapioca, couscous. They are left for the end. They don't need to be eliminated. They don't need to be reduced to symbolic amounts that leave everyone frustrated and hungry. When they arrive last, after the fiber and protein, the intestine is already partially protected, gastric emptying has been slowed, incretins are already active, and the glycemic impact of these carbohydrates is much lower than it would be if they were consumed first. The same amount of rice that previously caused a peak of 180 might now cause a gentler rise that stays at 140 or less, depending on individual response. A comment here about beans, because on many plates, beans occupy a special position. They are simultaneously a vegetable protein and a low glycemic index complex carbohydrate rich in soluble fiber. Diabetes societies confirm that legumes like beans and chickpeas have a protective effect on blood glucose precisely because of this combination of protein and fiber. Beans can come in either the second or third stage without compromising the strategy. What is most important is that the rice comes after the vegetables and some source of protein. Now I will show you how to apply this order to different meals of the day. At lunch and dinner, instead of serving everything together and eating it mixed, you start with the salad: lettuce, tomato, grated carrots with olive oil and lemon or vinegar. Eat all the salad calmly, without rushing. Then take the meat, chicken, or fish, and eat a good portion. If you like, eat the beans at this stage. And only then, with your stomach already receiving fiber and protein, do you serve and eat the rice, potatoes, or pasta. The feeling many people report is that they feel satisfied with a smaller amount of rice than they used to eat. Precisely because the GLP-1 stimulated by the protein and fiber has already signaled satiety before you get to the carbohydrate. At breakfast, which is where many diabetics have the highest peak of the day without realizing it, the change is also simple and practical. Breakfast often starts with bread, crackers, tapioca, or cereal. These are pure carbohydrates with nothing in front to protect the blood sugar. The result is a significant spike in the early hours of the day. The change is starting with eggs. Before touching the bread, eat a boiled egg, scrambled eggs, or a simple omelet. If you have cheese, a slice of cheese. If you have tomato or cucumber in the fridge, put a slice or two on the plate as well. Only then eat the bread or cereal. This sequence, protein and eventually vegetable before the carbohydrate, significantly reduces the breakfast glycemic peak without requiring you to change what is on your plate. For snacks between meals, the most important rule is this: never eat a carbohydrate alone. A cracker, a piece of fruit, or a piece of bread consumed alone generates an immediate peak with nothing to slow it down. Always combine it with a protein or healthy fat, a banana with cashew nuts, fruit with cheese, a cracker with peanut butter, a slice of bread with cream cheese. This combination softens the glycemic impact significantly, and if possible, eat any vegetable portion or protein before the fruit, maintaining the same order logic even for a snack. And about dessert, because it is a very common question. If you are going to eat something sweet, the best time of day for that is right after the main meal, not as an isolated snack hours later between meals. Within a meal that has already started with vegetables and protein, the dessert finds an intestinal environment much more protected by the fiber barrier and the incretin effect, and its glycemic impact is much lower than it would be if consumed on an empty stomach or separately from meals. This is not permission to eat dessert every day in large quantities. It is information about the least harmful time to consume it when you do so. Now, I need to talk about the most common mistakes so you don't fall into them. The first mistake is thinking that the order compensates for any amount of carbohydrate. The strategy reduces the peak significantly and in a documented way, but if you eat a very large amount of carbohydrate, the protective effect of the order decreases proportionally. The amount of carbohydrate still matters and needs to be appropriate for your case. The order enhances glycemic control, but it is not a blank check to eat carbohydrates without limit. The second mistake is ignoring the quality of the carbohydrate. Whole carbohydrates with more fiber have a lower glycemic impact than refined ones, regardless of the order. Brown rice, sweet potatoes, cassava, yams, and legumes are better choices than white bread, refined crackers, and white flour. The order strategy and carbohydrate quality work together and enhance each other. The third mistake is measuring blood sugar right after the first meal using this strategy and expecting a dramatic immediate reduction in the result. The acute effect on postprandial glucose is real and occurs from the very first meal where you apply the correct order. But overall glycemic control, reflected in A1C and the trend of logs over time, improves gradually over weeks and months of consistency. If you have a glucometer at home, the way to track it is to measure 1 hour and 2 hours after the meal on days you follow the correct order and on days you don't, and compare the patterns over weeks. Your own data is the most honest indicator. The fourth mistake is applying the strategy only at lunch and forgetting other meals. The breakfast peak, which in many diabetics is the highest and most harmful peak of the day, is exactly where changing the order can also make a big difference. Every meal is an opportunity to apply this knowledge. The fifth mistake is giving up when you can't make the order perfect. Sometimes you are at a restaurant, at a family lunch, or simply having a busy day where things don't go as planned. In those moments, do the best you can under the circumstances. Eating at least the salad before the rice is already better than eating everything mixed together. Perfect shouldn't be the enemy of good. The strategy works cumulatively over time. To finish, I want to put everything into 6 simple rules you can keep and use every day. First, always start with salad or vegetables. The more fiber and the more protective seasoning, like olive oil and lemon or vinegar, the better. Second, after the vegetables comes the protein: chicken, meat, fish, eggs, beans, chickpeas. Third, the carbohydrate is the last to enter: rice, potatoes, cassava, bread, pasta. Fourth, never eat isolated carbohydrates for snacks. Always combine them with protein or healthy fat. Fifth, if you are going to eat dessert, the best time is right after the main meal, not hours later. Sixth, this strategy complements medical treatment. Never change medications on your own. A zero-cost strategy. Without needing to change what you eat. Without needing any special product. Just reorganizing the sequence of what you already put on your plate every day. And with a solid scientific base, replicated in multiple studies since 2015, confirmed by international diabetes guidelines, and published in Diabetes Care in studies reaching until 2025. When science converges this way, over a decade of independent research reaching the same conclusion, the evidence is robust enough for you to trust and put into practice. And if you want to go further and have access to more than 630 practical recipes designed for the daily life of those with diabetes, with meals already structured to help with glycemic control, sweet and savory from breakfast to dinner, our ebook, 630 Simple Recipes for Diabetics, is available for just 87 Rs or equivalent in a one-time payment. The link is here in the description. Comment below. Did you already know about this strategy? Or are you going to change the order of your meal starting today? Tell me which meal is going to be the first one you reorganize. This exchange of real experience helps everyone who is here learning together. Share this video with someone who has diabetes and still eats rice before everything else. This information can make a real and immediate difference in that person's blood sugar, costing nothing and requiring no change in what they eat. Subscribe to the channel. Here, I publish health content every week with real scientific backing explained clearly, especially for those aged 55 and older. I am Dr. Sarah Walker, and remember, it's not just what you eat. It's how, in what quantity, and in what order you eat.